Online pro Mike Sowers UNCC Sowers recently took down a preliminary event in the Borgata Winter Poker Open, netting him nearly $400,000 for his biggest tournament cash to date. His online poker resume is also impressive. He has more than $500,000 in lifetime Online Player of the Year cashes, which include a win in the PokerStars World Championship of Online Poker Limit Holdem event, a win in the Ultimate Bet $200,000 Guaranteed event, and wins in both the 1K Monday on Full Tilt and the Super Tuesday on PokerStars, both $1,000 buy-in events. Card Player has Mike on the phone today to talk about his recent win, his success both live and online, and the strategies he's used to accomplish that success. Well, before we get started with your recent success and all of that, how about you kind of give our viewers some background on how you got into poker and what methods you used to improve your game?
Mainly what got me into poker was watching Rounders in high school. It was pretty much the big poker boom. Chris Moneymaker just won the World Series of Poker, so it was kind of like anybody could do this, was the mindset that I had. And so in high school, I just played a bunch of sit-and-goes with like all my friends, and I usually won those pretty consistently. So I guess it gave me like a sense of I could really do this if I tried, so I started playing online. And pretty much online was kind of a roller coaster to begin with. I'd win some and I'd lose some. I was a pretty bad poker player, I guess. I started playing the high limits and ran up a pretty big bankroll and then went bust. And then when I came back, I took about a year off after I went bust. And when I came back, I just decided to play well within my bankroll. I grinded sit-and-goes, so that gave me a lot of in-game strategy every single sit-and-go I'm playing because of the bubble and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And also, I subscribed to Poker X Factor and started watching a bunch of the videos that those guys put down, pretty much all of those, and increasing my circle of friends who also played poker at a high level to talk to them about hands and, you know, just talk with each other about certain situations and how they would play the situation, and just pretty much just trying to increase my mind capacity of all the different situations, as well as playing just a lot. I mean, when you play online, you can play, 8 to 10 tables at a time, so you really see a lot of hands.
Right. Well, and you said that when you started getting really serious about poker, you started playing the sit-and-goes to develop your in-game strategy. Would you kind of suggest that that's maybe one of the best ways to get started in tournament poker, just because you see all the different levels of play?
I definitely would. I think that pretty much most of the top internet players who have gone on to do really good things in multi-tournaments all have some background in sit-and-goes. It helps you learn the mathematics and push-shove. It just really it's really just a smaller, tighter multi-table tournament. It's really easy to translate from a sit-and-go to a multi-table tournament with just a few different things. I mean, big players like Jonathan Little and The Dry are some of the best sit-and-go players in the world, and you see what they're doing in the live and online internet. So.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think about the proliferation of the turbo sit-and-goes nowadays? Do you like them, or do you kind of think they're watering down the sit-and-go population, or what?
I really, honestly, it's kind of like I wasn't around when the turbos made it real big. I quit playing sit-and-goes 6-7 months ago, I guess, and I probably wouldn't play them again unless I had an online deal, say with like Full Tilt or PokerStars, where I got raked back.
Hint, hint.
But I think that turbos they're still profitable, but I think that your return on investment is going to be slightly lower, but you can play a lot more because they're faster. So I'm not really sure whether or not they would actually be more profitable, or it just seems to me like it's more of a gambling game than a regular sit-and-go, I guess.
Okay. Well, since that Winter Poker Open score was your largest score ever, did that open up your schedule to a lot more live events, or do you still primarily play online?
Well, honestly, I turned 21 in October, and since then, my live events, I've started playing a lot more. I try not to get on the road too much. I like being at home. I like being able to go, exercise, stuff like that. When you're on the road, you're eating bad, You're not, exercising usually, at least me, because I'm lazy. But I definitely am playing a lot more live events this year because I found a backer who's willing to put me in anything that I want to play and not take my action online, which was a big thing for me. But I guess it's going to be a little less online this year and a little more live. But I still like trying to have that balance in my life where, I'm saying I'm not, putting 250 hours into poker a month like maybe I did in the past. So really, I guess it's going to be more equal between online and live. And if I get another big score, it might even be a lot more live and a lot less online because I almost am getting tired of sitting in front of the computer, and I found myself getting a little impatient sometimes, whereas in the past I would really focus no matter how many hours I was playing online.
Well, how do you combat that kind of impatience, though? Because that's, I'm sure, a huge problem for a lot of online players is just kind of getting impatient, even though everything's going a lot more quickly and you're playing a lot more tables.
Yeah, for sure. Really, the big thing that I do to combat that is just make sure I'm trying to eat healthier and, work out, because the big thing with me is I think that whenever you're eating bad, stuff like that, I mean, the stuff you eat actually has a lot to do with your brain activity. And so the better diet you have, the more exercise you do, the more stuff you do away from poker actually will help your poker game because it'll keep you more patient. You won't let a bad beat hurt you as bad because your brain activity is just a lot more healthier than if you weren't eating as well or exercising. If you were just sitting in front of the computer all day, it's a lot more easy to get really impatient when things aren't going your way.
Right. Well, switching back to the Winter Poker Open real quick, do you remember what it was that was working for you in that tournament?
Really, live players are a lot more passive, and really I ran really good in that tournament. I remember 3 key hands that pretty much propelled me to go on to win the tournament. 7-handed, the final table had a lot of good players on it. Eric Lingren was there, and Tom Dwan, a.k.a. Durr online, was there. And I remember Durr opened the pot to like 3 times the big blind, and Eric called, and I had about 17 blinds and a good squeeze stack. And I had King 10 suited, so I went ahead and went out with the squeeze and shoved all in. And Eric thought about it for a while, and he had a pretty good read on me because we had played for probably about a day and a half together. And he made the call with King Queen of Diamonds, and I hit a 10 on the river to keep me alive, 7-handed. And it gave me a pretty big chip stack. And then when we got down to 3-handed, it was me and Durr. And Durr had a slight chip edge on. No, I had a slight chip edge on Durr, but there was another guy 3-handed who was a really donkish player. He'd gotten really lucky to get there. He had never been in that situation before with that much money on the line, and he was wanting to chop 6-handed, 5-handed, 4-handed, and me and Durr just kept turning it down because he didn't understand the tax ramifications.
Right.
And so what really happened was it was a 3-handed pot where Durr limped jacks in the small blind, which he probably would not do against most players, but the guy had limped the button. And if Durr had raised the pot, the guy definitely would have folded, because pretty much the only time he limped was with suited connectors, so we pretty much knew what he had. Mm-hmm. And if he hit anything on the flop, he would stack off, like even bottom pair. So Durr was playing off of that, hoping that he hit the flop and that he would stack off. And it worked out good for him because the guy hit top pair, but unluckily for Durr, I had actually hit 2 pair, and so I just won all the chips there and got 15-1 heads up. And I mean, against anybody, it's hard to come back from 15-1.
Right. Well, and you said that your winning the tournament was kind of a case of running good, and that's what a lot of people say when they win tournaments. But it seems to me that, and I'm sure you'll probably agree with this, that while it does depend a lot on running good, you also have to get yourself into a position to run good and basically cushion your stack so that you have the opportunity to run well.
Obviously, yes. I mean, if you want to win tournaments in the long run, you always have to play a good strategy. You always have to trust your reads, and pretty much play a sound strategy. You can't just go into every tournament, sticking your chips in the middle, hoping to get lucky.
Right.
I mean, in the long run, you need to make sure you're playing the odds, you're playing your reads on people, stuff like that. But to win one tournament, you're going to have to suck out, once or twice, and you're going to have to also win coin flips deep in the tournament. And anytime a good player wins a tournament, they know that they got lucky, but in the long run, they'll win tons of tournaments because of their skill. So in any one tournament, I mean, of course there's a lot of skill involved, but I would say there's more luck involved in just one tournament. But in the long run, that's when you actually start to see the skill of a player is, not in just one tournament. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Well, your only no-limit Holdem win that qualifies for Online Player of the Year points was in the Limit Holdem World Championship of Online Poker event that you won on PokerStars. And that was $145,000, which was your biggest online score, right?
Yes, and it was actually 120,000. I think we chopped heads up.
Okay. But it was still your biggest online score then?
Yeah, definitely. It was my biggest online score.
Okay. Well, you obviously aren't as well versed in Limit Hold'em tournaments as you are in no-limit events, but then neither are most people, really. How did you exploit the relatively green field?
Really, I used to grind a lot of limit back in the day. So, really, whenever you're playing limit tournaments, especially deep in the tournament, you're playing a lot of heads-up pots. And really, that's all I used to play whenever I first started playing poker was limit heads up. So I had a lot of experience in playing heads up limit pots. So really, I don't really think that I'd played a lot of limit tournaments, but I still think that the things that are awarded in tournaments are aggression and just knowledge of when to call down with maybe ace high in a limit tournament,
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of times where you have to put in your money because you're getting so much pot odds that a lot of people just don't understand that yet in limit tournaments or even limit games, really. And so I guess that would be my biggest exploit was that I knew how to play heads-up limit pots. I knew how to be really aggressive. I knew when to, raise the turn, like check raise the turn on them. That's one of my big strategies in the limit tournament is to check raise the turn because it looks so strong that they have to have such a big hand to call. And you're sitting so few blinds deep usually in limit tournaments that most people are just going to give up the pot if they don't have at least top pair or a really strong draw or something like that.
Okay. Well, what are some fundamental strategies that you employ in limit tournaments that maybe differ from no-limit tournaments?
I would say that I 3-bet a lot more because I really think in limit you have to be almost mindless aggressive. I remember that tournament there was a guy who would 4-bet and cap every flop, and he really knew nothing else other than to do that. And he was still getting chips, and everybody was like, "This guy's terrible," blah blah blah. And he would literally cap every flop, cap every turn, and I mean he was almost too mindless aggressive. But it really does pay to be really aggressive in these tournaments because you'll get a big stack, and when you have a big stack, you can control your own destiny a lot more than say if you're sitting around 10 blinds the whole tournament.
Right. Well, and it also makes sense to be able to 3-bet more often just because in no limit, if you 3-bet, you're facing a re-raise of God knows how much, but in limit, the worst that can happen is they re-raise you one more bet.
Exactly, and then you just call and you hit the flop, or you reevaluate. You might just call the flop and check raise the turn, which would look really, really strong.
Right.
So to them, they're saying, I 4-bet this guy pre, and he check called the flop and then check raised the turn. He has to have something really strong where they might fold, second pair in that situation.
Okay.
And you're sitting there with just a draw hoping that they fold on the turn.
Okay. Well, how often do you play in these non-Holdem events?
Honestly, I really don't enjoy them a lot unless they're a big pot or like $1,000 tournament. That was pretty fun just because I knew that most of the people that were putting their money in that tournament had either satellited in or hadn't had much experience. The guy that I was heads up with was actually a really, really good limit player. Everybody, as I kept going deeper, telling me that he was probably the best player left in the field. His name was Jump or something.
And that's saying something because it was a pretty stacked final table.
Yeah, he was really good. Plattsburgh was there. I think Scott Fishman was there. I'm sure Scott Fishman knows how to play limit Hold'em really well.
Yeah.
But I really don't play in them a lot. I'll probably play in some World Series limit or pot limit Omaha events maybe. I'm just starting to learn pot limit Omaha a little bit. But honestly, like no limit Hold'em, it just seems there's so much more money in it and there's so much more competition that that's really what I like is the competition aspect. So if there's a lot of people doing it, I'm going to do it too to see if I can beat them.
Okay.
So that's pretty much the whole gist of it, I guess.
Well, and actually, speaking of the World Series you brought up, obviously this is going to be your first World Series that you can play in legally.
Correct.
How big of a deal is that going to be for you? How many events are you planning on playing in, and are you planning on moving into a house out here with some other people?
Honestly, I've not even made any accommodations yet.
Okay.
Whether I'm going to do a house or a hotel. I know my backer's a 5-star something, so he'll probably have like a suite the entire month. And I'll probably just stay with him, but I think that I'm going to be playing about 20 to 30 events. I'm not sure. My brother's in the Army, and he'll be coming home sometime, I think, in June or July. So he'll be back on 2 weeks leave before he goes back to Iraq. So, that's most important to me, obviously, is hanging out with my brother, seeing him one more time before he actually goes back to Iraq. So if that gets in the way of a couple World Series of Poker events, then so be it. But I would like to play 20 or 30 tournaments. I'll probably play almost every 1,500, 2,000, 5,000, and 10,000 no-limit Hold'em event whenever I'm there. And then I might throw in a couple limit tournaments, maybe a pot limit Omaha or two.
Well, you've won 2 $1,000 buy-in events online, events that are notorious for their stacked fields. Would you rather play against a whole bunch of stacked tables and a field full of really good players, or would you rather play in a field with relatively unknown players that you don't know anything about but are more likely to be weak?
Yeah, honestly, this is a really simple question. I think that most people that are really good are going to say that they want to play against unpredictable, unknown bad players, because the good thing about the top players is that they can adapt to whoever they're playing against. So one thing about the really good players is that against other really good players, they know how to keep you from making moves on them. So you're really limited in what you can do against good players, whereas when you're playing against a table full of bad players, you might could re-raise them all in when they're getting 2-1 on a bluff, knowing that they're super tight that they could fold, whereas a really good player is never almost going to fold, getting 2-1 pre-flop. I really would like to play against worser players, just because overall the most players in poker, especially online and live, is that the really bad players are really passive weak. And so when they're really passive weak, you can be, aggressive, kind of loose, and you can really build your chips up, and it just lets you control the table that much more. So I'd definitely rather be against weak players, because I can adapt and figure out how they're playing quick enough before the blinds start going up to actually get a feel on what each player's doing and how to exploit what they're doing. Whereas against a bunch of really good players, of course I might have millions of times played with them, but it's still going to be tough, where the edge just isn't as great as it would be against a table full of no-names that are kind of clueless. I wouldn't say clueless, just not as clued in as the really top players, I guess.
Well, and it also kind of makes sense from what you're saying that even though an unknown player is inherently more unpredictable, the players that you play against all the time, the really good players, are possibly even more unpredictable just because they're that good. So
Exactly.
Well, the last question I have for you right now is, what playing styles do you think generally work the best in the different stages of the tournaments nowadays?
Wow. Honestly, I really think that playing styles, I don't like that playing styles. I don't like loose. I don't like when people say that somebody's loose or passive because, I think a really good example is I used to think that Risen was really tight every single table I played with him, but I see him on tables where it is a bunch of no-names, and he's just aggressive, just, controlling the table so well. I just think that really good players are always going to adapt, to whatever. So I would say the best playing style is the people that can adapt to whoever's on their table and take advantage of it the best because, you could be really loose aggressive against a bunch of loose calling stations and it's not going to work so well. Whereas a tag would really take over the table because everybody's going to call off his strong hands and pay him off. So you really just need to look at your players that are on the table, what they're doing, and just, play pots with the bad players that you think are going to put their money in marginally, maybe call you down when you have strong hands. And then the really tight players, you can be a little more aggressive against those guys.
Okay. Excellent advice. Well, that's all I have for you. I really appreciate you doing this interview with us.
Okay, I appreciate the chance to do it with you guys, too. And I hope you have a good day and a good year, and I'll probably see you out at the World Series of Poker for sure.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Have a good day, man.
Okay, thanks.
And thank you guys for watching the Online Zone on Card Player TV.